2.4 miles, less than the length of Central Park, less than the width of most cities. That is the distance between Russia and the United States at their closest point. Two nuclear superpowers, two opposing time zones, and one stretch of frozen ocean, where on a clear winter day, a person standing on one country can see the other with the naked eye. The water between them is called the Bering Strait, 82 kilometers wide at its narrowest pinch, 49 meters deep at its shallowest point. For 4 months a year, it freezes solid enough that, in theory, a human being could walk from one continent to the other. In the middle of the strait sit two small islands. Big Diomede belongs to Russia. Little Diomede belongs to the United States. 3.8 kilometers of water separate them. They are visible from each other every clear morning. They are also separated by 21 hours. The international dateline runs between them. When it is Sunday afternoon on Little Diomede, it is already Monday afternoon on Big Diomede. The locals call them Tomorrow Island and Yesterday Island. Until 1948, the people of these two islands were one community, Inupiat hunters, cousins, siblings. Then a line was drawn across the water, and the Cold War sealed it shut for 40 years. This is the story of the narrowest gap between the world's two largest nuclear arsenals and the indigenous village that was cut in half to draw it. The Bering Strait sits at roughly 66 degrees north latitude, just below the Arctic Circle. It connects the Pacific Ocean to the south with the Chukchi Sea and the Arctic Ocean to the north. To its west lies the Russian region of Chukotka. To its east, the US state of Alaska. The strait is named for Vitus Bering, a Danish navigator sailing under the Russian Imperial Navy, who charted it in 1728. It is 82 kilometers wide at its narrowest point and roughly 350 kilometers wide at its mouth. The water is shallow, averaging 50 meters, never deeper than 90. During the last ice age, this was not water at all. Sea levels were 120 meters lower. The entire strait was a grassland bridge, more than 1,000 kilometers wide from north to south. Archaeologists call it Beringia. It is the corridor through which the first human beings entered the Americas, an estimated 15,000 to 20,000 years ago. Every indigenous person from the Yukon to Patagonia descends from people who walked across what is now the Bering Strait. The land bridge submerged around 11,000 years ago. The peoples on either side did not stop crossing. For thousands of years afterward, Inupiat and Yupik communities moved freely between the two coasts. They hunted bowhead whale, walrus, and seal. They intermarried. They spoke related languages. They considered the strait not a border, but a road. Russia formally claimed the western shore in 1648. The United States purchased Alaska from Russia in 1867, 1.5 million square kilometers for $7.2 million in gold, roughly 2 cents per acre. The border between the two empires was drawn straight down the middle of the strait, passing between the two Diomede Islands. For 81 years, the border existed only on paper. People kept crossing. Then came 1948. In the opening years of the Cold War, the Soviet Union sealed its Arctic frontier. The border through the Bering Strait, which until then had been crossed by hunters in skin boats and dog sleds, became one of the most heavily watched lines on Earth. Soviet patrols swept the Chukotka coast. Radar stations were built on the cliffs. The 3.8 kilometers of water between Big and Little Diomede became overnight the closest physical point of contact between the two superpowers. The people of Big Diomede, a village called Immokalee, with a population of around 200, were forcibly relocated to the Russian mainland. Their houses were burned. The island was converted into a Soviet military and weather outpost. Big Diomede has had no civilian population since. On Little Diomede, on the American side, the village of Ignawak remained. Roughly 80 people live there in 2026. They are Inupiat. Their grandparents had relatives across the water on Big Diomede. After 1948, those relatives stopped answering. Letters were not delivered. Radio contact was forbidden. The water between them, narrow enough to row across in an hour, became uncrossable. For 4 decades, the strait was the front line of a war that never officially began. Soviet MiG fighters scrambled along its western edge. American F-15s patrolled the eastern. Submarines crossed beneath the ice. Listening stations on both sides tracked every movement. The boundary that runs through the strait is technically called the Treaty of Secession Line of 1867, modified by the 1990 USA-USSR Maritime Boundary Agreement. The 1990 treaty was signed by James Baker and Eduard Shevardnadze. It has been ratified by the United States Senate. It has never been ratified by the Russian Parliament. As of 2026, the boundary is, in legal terms, provisional. For a brief window, the strait reopened. In 1987, the American long-distance swimmer Lynn Cox swam from Little Diomede to Big Diomede in water that hovered around 4 degrees Celsius. The swim took 2 hours and 6 minutes. Mikhail Gorbachev and Ronald Reagan jointly praised it. At the Washington summit later that year, Gorbachev raised a glass to her, saying she had proved that the two countries were close enough to be touched. In 1989, the so-called Friendship Flight from Nome, Alaska to Providencia, Russia, became the first commercial passenger flight across the strait in over 40 years. Inupiat and Yupik families reunited on a tarmac. Some had not seen each other since they were children. Some met grandchildren for the first time. The flight crossed 350 kilometers of ocean in under an hour. For most of the 1,990 seconds, limited cross-strait travel was permitted. Then it closed again. In 2026, there are no scheduled flights between the American and Russian shores of the Bering Strait. There is no ferry. There is no border crossing. The 3.8 kilometers between Big and Little Diomede are again, for civilians, impassable. What does exist in 2026 is military infrastructure. On the American side, Eielson Air Force Base, 800 kilometers inland, home to F-35 squadrons. The early warning radar at Clear, Alaska, part of the North Warning System, scans continuously toward the strait. The Coast Guard maintains air stations at Kodiak and Sitka. The deepwater port at Nome is being expanded. As of 2026, it is the only U.S. deepwater port within 1,000 kilometers of the Arctic Circle. On the Russian side, the Anadyr Air Base in Chukotka, refurbished beginning in 2014. The Wrangel Island military outpost, 500 kilometers to the north. Reactivated Soviet-era radar installations along the Chukotka coastline. Anti-ship missile batteries reported on the Chukchi Peninsula. The reopened airfield at Providencia, 240 kilometers from American territory. Between these two military networks lies the strait itself. Shallow, narrow, increasingly ice-free. The ice is the variable that has changed everything. For most of recorded history, the Bering Strait froze solid from December to May. The ice was a wall. It made the strait, in practical terms, a closed border with a 4-month seasonal lock. As recently as the 1980s, ice cover regularly exceeded 2 meters in thickness across most of the channel. In the winter of 2018, the Bering Sea recorded the lowest ice extent in at least 5,500 years, based on sediment core analysis published in Science Advances. The pattern has held. Each winter since has seen ice forming later, breaking up earlier, and covering less of the strait. The northern sea route along the Russian Arctic coast, which uses the Bering Strait as its eastern gateway, was navigable by container ship for 96 days in 2010. By 2024, it was navigable for over 150 days a year. By mid-century, climate models project a fully ice-free Arctic summer. In 2009, 4 ships passed through the Bering Strait in commercial transit. In 2024, over 600 did. The chokepoint that did not exist a generation ago now exists. This is the strategic shift. For the first time in modern history, the Bering Strait is becoming a navigable, year-round maritime corridor between the Pacific and the Atlantic. It is the only sea route between the two oceans that does not require the Panama Canal, the Suez Canal, or the Cape of Good Hope. For Russia, the northern sea route is a national priority. Cargo volume along the route reached 36 million tons in 2023, up from 4 million in 2014. President Putin has set a target of 200 million tons by 2030. For the United States, the strait is the only maritime gateway to its Arctic claims, and the only choke point at which Chinese, Russian, and American naval interests meet on a body of water less than 100 kilometers wide. In September 2022, a flotilla of 7 Chinese and Russian naval vessels conducted joint patrols 138 kilometers from the Alaskan coast, the largest such transit ever recorded near American territorial waters. The U.S. Coast Guard cutter Kimball monitored them. They did not enter U.S. waters. They did not need to. The message was the geography itself. The strait is also one of the great migratory corridors of the planet. Roughly half of the world's bowhead whale population, around 16,000 animals, passes through it each year. Pacific walrus, an estimated 200,000, follow the retreating ice north every spring. Gray whales make the longest mammalian migration on Earth, 20,000 kilometers round trip, and the Bering Strait is the gate they pass through twice a year. The shorelines on both sides remain among the most sparsely populated coasts on the planet. Chukotka, on the Russian side, holds roughly 47,000 people in an area larger than France. The Bering Sea coast of Alaska holds roughly 25,000. The villages, Wales, Diomede, Gamble, Savonga on the American side, Uelin, Lavrentia, Larino on the Russian side, are reachable in winter only by snowmobile or small aircraft. Wales, Alaska is the westernmost incorporated community on the North American mainland. Its population is 145. Across 82 kilometers of water lies Cape Dezhnev, the easternmost point of mainland Eurasia. On clear days, from the cliffs above Wales, the Russian coastline is visible to the unaided eye. 2 continents, 2 empires, 1 horizon. The legal status of the strait is, in 2026, the quiet question. The 1999 boundary agreement, never ratified by the Russian Federation, governs roughly 1,600 kilometers of maritime border, including the Bering Strait itself. Russian state media has, in the past decade, periodically raised the question of revisiting the boundary. Members of the Russian Duma have publicly questioned the legality of the 1,867 Alaska Purchase. No formal Russian government claim has been filed, but the rhetorical groundwork is, observers note, being laid. Meanwhile, neither country has formally declared the Bering Strait an international strait under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. The United States has not ratified UNCLOS at all. The legal regime governing the world's most strategically important emerging choke point is, in formal terms, undefined. The world has 7 maritime choke points that carry more than 30% of global trade: the Strait of Hormuz, the Strait of Malacca, the Suez Canal, the Panama Canal, the Bab el-Mandeb, the Bosphorus, the Danish Straits. Each one is the site of standing military deployments, formal treaties, and decades of diplomatic infrastructure. The Bering Strait is the 8th. It has none of them. On Little Diomede, in 2026, around 80 people live in a village built on a slope of volcanic rock. There are no roads, there are no cars. The school has fewer than 20 students. The post office receives mail by helicopter when the weather permits, which is roughly half the days of the year. Fresh water comes from a single mountain spring. In winter, the village's only flat surface is a sheet of sea ice, on which a helicopter pad is plowed each year, and which serves as the airport from December to May. 3.8 kilometers to the west, Big Diomede rises out of the same water. It has no village, it has no homes. It has a Russian border guard station, a weather monitoring outpost, and the foundations of the houses that were burned in 1948. On clear days from Little Diomede, the cliffs of Big Diomede are close enough that the seabirds nesting on them can be counted. The grandparents of the people on Little Diomede were born on Big Diomede. Some of them are still alive. They have not seen their birthplace in 78 years. In the language of the Inupiat who live on these islands, there is no separate word for the two Diomedes. They are spoken of as one place, with two halves. The water between them is not described as a border, it is described as a path that has been closed. A path that for 11,000 years was open, that for 78 years has not been, and that as the ice retreats and the ships multiply and the radars on both shores blink across 82 kilometers of warming sea, is becoming again the most important stretch of water that almost no one on Earth has ever seen. The world's next choke point is here. The world has not yet noticed.